periods where we don't know if you know that's recording. As per usual, the code of conduct applies. Welcome to the YouTube audience. Goodbye, Ben. Apparently. Yeah, anyone watching this on YouTube, if you want to take part in this going forward, we will link the meeting documentation, the meeting notes, which have joining information in the recording notes, what have you. It's September 2021, and it's a little bit light in attendance in between sickness and people being busy. So let's see what we can. We might do this when Julian is here. Spartacus. Yep. I mean, Julian isn't here, and he proposed a topic. On the other hand, we have relatively good coverage of people caring about who voted for this. Alert Manager custom webhooks / body template. Should we discuss this, or should we wait the hour until Julian might be coming?
I mean, I guess Julian is the closest. I mean, Simon would be perfect to have here for Alert Manager, but I mean, Julian is the de facto maintainer at the moment, I would say.
Okay, so let's skip it. We have renaming metrics. That is also at least proposed by Julian, but 3 of the people in this call voted for it, so we'll also wait for Julian. PromQL changes for histograms and beyond. I don't know if you have enough by now, Björn, that we can discuss this.
Yeah, as written in the note, I would actually prefer to get this did I call it exploratory document? Yeah. Thanks, Richie. That was I got that from you, that word. Hello. And I think it would make way more sense after I have written down all my random thoughts. It's not yet a design doc. It's more like setting the stage so we can discuss how a design doc should look like. Sounds a bit procedural, but I think that's a more efficient approach than discussing this half-bred state right now.
No, absolutely fine. I'm just walking through stuff. So the next one by votes, but it feels weird to discuss this with basically only one non-Grafana maintainer or member in this, or team member in this call. Grafana is allowing non-Prometheus label names in Alert Manager, which I think is an interesting discussion. But on the other hand, if there's an overwhelming majority of Grafana people, conflict of interest, maybe.
And then it's an Alert Manager topic, and Julian was already invested kind of in that. So
verify when to use feature flags. That was quick from writing it down to getting it into discussion, Björn. Congratulations. You have the floor.
Feature flags is again where Julian triggered the discussion. Like I put it in here, but the discussion on Prometheus developers was started by Julian.
Yeah, but
we all depend on Julian.
On there, or we postpone by an hour, but that seems suboptimal. I mean, on the plus side, we are really getting through the backlog, which is super nice.
Yeah. I mean, do we have like remote write topics? Because I think we have all the relevant people for that here. There was something, right?
We have one.
Is this in the discuss section? Yeah, it's in the discuss section. No.
This retry behavior, wasn't that?
Retries.
Retry characteristics when encountering 4xx and 5xx.
Okay.
That's remote write, right?
It's yes, it's remote write, and specifically how we're going to handle that with the compliance suite, I believe.
That might be a good topic, I guess.
Yep, let's get going. Oh, I wrote it down. Sorry for anyone watching this. It's a little bit stressful at the moment. And I came into this blank. Normally, I block half an hour to prepare for this call. Yeah, it's basically like if you look into the request by Tom and the discussion with Julian yet again. Basically, the question is how Prometheus Remote Write, or even casted wider, all of Prometheus should treat 400s and 500s, and when we want to simply back off and stop, or when we want to be more aggressive in retrying.
Yeah. So the main point of contention that I'm aware of is 429s, so which is specifically rate limiting. Right now, Prometheus will not retry anything that is a 429 unless you turn a feature toggle on, and then it always retries. There's been a handful of discussions around what we want to do in this case. In some cases, like if it's a very temporary, you're temporarily over, you do want to retry sending those to not lose data. Other systems, those very well might fail for too long, and you might want to give up on retries. Similarly, 5xx's are always retried right now. Some users would prefer not to always retry forever. They care more about recent data than they do about data that might be half an hour ago or something, especially if, say, they're using alerting and like the alert systems wherever they're remote writing to. So those are the couple of use cases in Prometheus proper that I know of. And then as we're really making things defined with the compliance suite, these become less experimental and more, we need to nail down what behavior we want. So that's kind of the background I have on this. Curious what all, have I missed anything?
I think you covered it pretty decently.
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, so I'm curious, like, what do people think of the status quo now? Do you think, like, we should be making changes or more options available to users?
I mean, coming from the networking world, exponential backoff is far from perfect, but it's something which tends to do the right thing more or less as if by magic, which I like. It's sometimes a little bit unexpected if you get into super long retry periods, but beyond this, it usually tends to do the right thing, and it tends to self-recover if things come back, and not cause a stampede effect if things do not come back.
Makes sense. Yeah. Have you seen that for, like, one of the things I've seen is exponential backoff works, but when the system restores, you now have to catch up on a very large backlog of data. So like I've definitely experienced this kind of stampeding from that catching up on a backlog. Where that's where I've seen this exponential backoff. Like, it works fine for those requests that are out, but it's just building potentially a while.
I mean, this would be an argument in favor of being more aggressive in sending them, or expecting them to be sent, to basically, like, if you can assume that things will come back, but they will take more and more time in coming back, then you can, in theory, try to kick things out earlier and then just rely on basically statistical distribution to take care of your problem. Like if your stampede is huge at some point, you'll still clobber the thing. But you have a little bit more of a chance to just distribute your load.
But isn't a retry on 429 kind of strange? Because I mean, the endpoint kind of tells us to, it's rate limited, so we back off, but the request actually gets larger while we back off, wouldn't it?
I mean, the backlog of potential requests gets larger. The existing set of requests just stays the same. But yeah, that's a good point. So we do already have an exponential back off. The defaults are really small. It's like 30 milliseconds to 100 milliseconds. But we could potentially revisit the defaults, as well as like if you get a rate limit, maybe allow for increasing the back off even further for that specific request. I'm not sure, but I don't know. I've been talking to people internally about some users that are seeing issues with remote write and want more retry type config, and I don't know. I see problems given that remote write is kind of supposed to be streaming and also supposed to never lose your data, as well as already has tons of configuration knobs. And adding another set is just more confusion for users that already have a hard time understanding remote write. So if we can come up with sane defaults for how to handle retries and like the PR that's open to limit the number of retries kind of a thing, then I think that's okay. But I don't know. I'm still skeptical about additional complexity for edge use cases.
Yeah. So the 429 point is an interesting one as well. So like 429 is just too many requests, and that can be a permanent state or a temporary state, or like we don't actually know all that much about it. Like there's also there's specifically a retry after header that can be returned with 429, which like that feels like, okay, maybe if there's that, we should be retrying sometimes. But if you're getting too many, you're just going to fall behind forever. So you end up in these like if you're actually exceeding a limit, you're just forever going to fall behind, and eventually you're going to have to delete data or something. And that it's very dependent on the system you're sending data to as well.
Chris, I'm not knowledgeable enough about remote write to properly summarize what you're saying. Perhaps you could put this in the notes in a way that is actually correct.
Yeah. So I was just, yep.
Yeah,
I was trying to explain there's a comment that 429 it's kind of weird to retry on, but there are definitely use cases for it as well.
Yeah, if you can, yeah, exactly this stuff. Yeah. Just a bystander question: is remote write actually sending batches with more than one sample per series if there's a huge backlog? I think we discussed this, and my vague memory is it doesn't.
No.
I mean that could help in getting through a backlog, couldn't it?
I mean, so in most cases, we're talking about Prometheus remote write being rate limited because of some samples per second rate limit. And yeah, I don't know. I could see that also running into the same rate limit where you're trying to catch up and then you hit the rate limit again. There's also the issue of remote write's configuration is basically there to ensure that remote write itself never uses more than some configurable amount of memory and doesn't Prometheus, and creating batches of multiple samples per series where we're having to read through more of the wall than we normally would to fill up all the shards. Could run into more issues there.
Right now we essentially create requests as we go through the wall without patching them up. Yeah, okay, I see.
Exactly. We read through the wall. We send each sample to a shard based on its the hash of its labels, essentially. And as soon as that shard reaches the configured maximum number of samples per batch, it automatically starts sending that batch.
Okay. Yeah. And the 429 is meant to be returned when the actual ingest load in samples per second is too high, not if the backend is just busy. Because like a lot could be just creating all the protobufs in Prometheus side, unpacking them, and then you do all of this just to get a single sample with all the labels, blah, blah, blah. This is when I think batching up could actually save a lot of resources and then perhaps make the backend more efficient, so it doesn't need to imply the rate limit. But yeah, if the rate limit is like something you do with users as a service provider, or you say you can only ingest 1 million samples per second, then of course all of that wouldn't help.
Yeah, and that's where I commonly see the 429s will actually, like I've very commonly seen it outage or Prometheus or something where Prometheus backed up, started sending again, and immediately gets rate limited, and then you dropped all of that data that we were just trying to send for a while. So that wasn't exactly a very helpful behavior in Prometheus, because we just we kept data for half an hour and then we just dropped it all anyway because the server said rate limited.
Yeah, but I mean, the only thing that would satisfy the receiver would be to actually remove samples, right? So you needed some downsampling or something.
Or you could send them at a slower rate to like maybe steady state plus 10%, like 5% to catch up, but maybe we tried plus 100% to catch up faster.
Yeah, like okay. So Prometheus needed a heuristics to find out if the rate limit is just too low to take the load, period, or if it just has to not try to catch up that quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now
there's no way to do that right now, besides attempting to configure shards, and like it's not a one-to-one at all. It's super complicated.
Okay, and then the question is, in how far should this be a standardized behavior that is in the conformance suite? Or should the conformance suite just say, do something smart?
I think given that we haven't decided what we want to do in Prometheus yet, then the conformance suite shouldn't have anything about it either. And when we come up with something, we can decide whether or not it should be considered part of saying, you know, you do remote write or you support remote write. But until then, like whatever Prometheus's defaults are, which is don't retry on 429, then yeah.
There is some leeway. If we were to have a consensus on a way forward, we can already, if we choose to, have info level stuff in the conformance suite without making this binding or erroring out or anything, but at least have something which points in this direction. Formally, we would need to update the specification of Prometheus Remote Write, and then based on this new version of the specification, we can actually make this an error or should or what have you. But I've seen this done several times in my past, that when a group knows where to go, just add some info stuff, so implementers who are testing can already see where it's going.
Sorry, I missed that for taking notes. Would someone else be able to put that in the notes? I was typing other things.
I can write it down. Also, thank you for writing notes. I completely missed this up to now. But as per usual, it's Chris and me. more
Bjorn was writing notes for a while, so
I literally didn't open the thing because I kept getting interrupts all the time. Okay, I take everything back and also thank Bjorn. Thank you. I'll write it down in a bit. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Richie wanted to say is if we could agree on a general direction here, it could be helpful, even if we don't have to nail it all down for the conformance program yet.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean.
And it still automatically has a steering function that anyone who tests and sees the thing will automatically start going in the direction which we choose, or at least anticipate this change happening.
Could we also do something like a server can retry, or like a sender can retry 429s or something like that, but not have to type thing?
So from the formal specification point of view, you can say must, should, may, and their inversions, with the exception of not may, which is weird in English.
Doesn't make sense anyway. Yeah.
The other may not is basically what must not should be in English, but that topic goes too far. So you basically have the inverse of must, or must not, should not, and may. There's a bunch of others which are largely irrelevant. We can also have reserved and such. But the really truly relevant ones are those 5: must not, should not, and may. And should is defined as we recommend it, and by default, like in the common case, it should be done. If you don't do it, you should have a good rationale. Like you should have thought about why you're not doing this, but no one is forcing you to do it. And we can put this nuance into the specification, and in some places we already do, because that's just common. The point I was making is we can, even before we have a new version of the spec, which we release, because that needs more, and it needs like a little bit of formal voting and such. Whereas if we just have consensus on where we currently want to go, we can already start putting this into the conformance test suite. Because then you can just, like you see in info with, hey, just FYI, we might end up doing this and that. So if you want, read over here and anticipate us making this thing as a change. Like that's the play. Because anyone who actively cares and runs the test suite will automatically see it happen, and then they will automatically start looking into it without us having to distribute it to everyone.
Okay. That makes sense. So do we have do we have like thoughts of where we would like to go? Like, would we like to, like, as Prometheus itself, would we like to implement something like an ability to retry 429s or discover a heuristic, maybe like retry on 429s if in some cases, like maybe if the retry header is present or some retry after header is present, or we can get some sort of heuristic from the system that this might work eventually? Or
I mean, conformance is meant for both, right? The receiver and the sender, isn't it?
So, currently, we have a conformance suite for Prometheus Remote Prometheus Remote Write sending. AWS and Azure are working towards having a test suite for Prometheus Remote Receiver, Prometheus Remote Write receivers. There is a design doc which I created for them like a month or two ago, for where they can collect stuff. We discussed this yesterday in the Open Telemetry Prometheus working group. Let me see if I find this quickly. Where they basically hashed out what they want to do, and part of the design now is to to basically send data to a Prometheus remote write endpoint, and then query it through a PromQL endpoint and see what comes out correctly and what does not come out correctly, which is not perfect, and you have some timing issues, blah, blah, blah. But it should be relatively resilient and relatively well covering everything. Yeah, and for
So
what
that,
they... Yep.
So that pretty much what Julius had for his PromQL testing?
Ish. The PromQL testing is steeper, and the PromQL testing needs human interpretation. Whereas with this automation, the rough plan, besides just testing the usual like Gorge and just blah blah blah, the usual the current plan, and I'll find it and link it in the meeting notes in a minute, is they take open metrics, which has a list of valid and invalid expositions, pulled this through Prometheus remote write, so they have something defined which is sent correctly. They can also, in theory, tie into TSDB, but like that's equivalent. Send this towards whatever is being tested. Use PromQL against an endpoint of the thing which is being tested, and then see what's coming back. But this is not with like super complex PromQL or anything. This is probably going to be just literally, I send stuff in and I just query the stuff and I see what JSON I get back. And maybe there's some leeway on the specific timing of the data points. But beyond this, the value and the label set must be the same.
Okay, I mean, I was asking about the receiver side because, I mean, Chris said, could we just say something for now that a sender may retry on 429? But if he could specify a bit on the receiving side in which way they should return 429s, then well, whoever sends samples can create a smart retry strategy, right? And perhaps that would be enough to enable implementers of a sender how to do the retry. But if you just say at some point you get the 429 in isolation, I think it will be hard to implement a heuristic how quickly you should retry, if at all. And then if you say you may retry, sure, but you might just run into more 429, but at least it gives you a chance to behave in a smart way, but we don't have to mandate how that precisely has to happen.
So, I mean, speaking, and I just sent something through chat and I'll link it in a second. Speaking from networking experience, suggesting a way in how retries should be structured is a good thing, because else it'll be all over the place and you cannot rely on the properties of the other thing. I don't think we should be putting a must in there, but we should, like, you may use this, and if you do, then you should use this and that heuristic or library. Speaking of libraries, there is a Go backoff library which implements experimental backoff. And I don't know if, like, OpenTelemetry told me ages ago that they intend to use this. I don't know if they ever did. But if they do, it just kind of makes sense to use the same thing across the board, unless someone has strong opinions around specifics of how to do exponential backoff. Yeah, and that's the kind of thing, like, we can look at this thing, and if it suits us, we can just say you should use this and done, or it should be modeled upon exponential backoff, for example, this library, and then we have something where we can point people and we can expect different implementers to behave.
All right. So like I think we could probably get consensus for like we should retry using exponential backoff on 5xx errors. Like that's probably not super controversial.
We already do that.
Like we already do that. Like I don't think we want to change that.
So for 429, should we just
429 is the question, yeah. Oh, cool. Okay, so that backoff library is used on all the Prometheus ecosystem projects. We could look into using in Prometheus itself. Maybe we have some custom, but it's not crazy.
Or to be more specific, it's at least vendored / mentioned in like all the Go modules files, but I think that's roughly what I can see. Let me dig it just a bit deeper, but yeah.
Okay. I'm rephrasing the consensus anyway, so. Consensus. We will explore exponential backoff of HTTP 429. We will try to suggest an ecosystem-wide approach. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing?
Can we add with heuristics in there?
We absolutely cannot. Consensus. We will explore exponential backoff for consensus. We will explore exponential backoff for HTTP 429. We will try to suggest ecosystem-wide heuristics so operators can expect default behavior.
Default behavior of the receiver, or
I didn't narrow it down on purpose.
intentionally not narrowed down. Okay.
Of whatever, there will be some set of default behavior.
Okay, makes sense.
It's about the intention of people not being all over the place. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing? Good. And for the new joiners, but I cannot read your name, unfortunately.
Vladimir.
Oh, you can read it? I'm envious to some extent. You're more than welcome to speak up at any time during this call. Like it's not just you listening to us kind of thing. You're explicitly invited to raise your voice at any time, except for when we have a call for consensus. That's when only Prometheus team members say yes and no. But every time else, at all other times, please speak up. It's way too many Prometheus team members speaking and way too few others.
Okay, thank you.
That's a record. You're one of the few people who, on their first call, dared to reply. I like it. It's kind of hard to break this ice. I don't know why, but it kind of is. Do we need anything other than HTTP 429? I don't think so.
Ben mentioned 500s very early. I think he just gave it, like put it into the notes without actually saying anything.
Yep.
Don't we already do this?
Yes.
Yes.
I was just stating that we shouldn't change this behavior.
Okay.
Yeah, because the topic is also 5xx, right? So it might sound like we wanted to discuss that as well.
We can have a call for consensus of not changing the properties of 5xx, but that's probably overkill. Matthias, did you find anything about if we're already using it everywhere and just didn't know about it?
Yeah, I put it in the chat, sorry. It's already used, for example, in Alert Manager for notifying, and then if that doesn't work, it will back off. So there, and I saw a bunch of usages in Loki, I believe, as well, and like other related Prometheus ecosystem projects. So
Nice.
Cool. Thanks for looking at that.
Alert Manager and what other one?
I think Loki.
Oh.
Or like the Cortex libraries used in Loki, I think.
Chris, why don't you know this by heart?
I'm not a maintainer of Cortex anymore.
It's probably older.
It probably is, yes.
Should we, in general, should the conformance problem contain something about how to retry for 5xx? Like not trigger a retry storm, or is that out of scope?
I was going to say, I think doing a should exponentially back off on 5xx seems like a reasonable statement for conformance to me. Like, it doesn't seem mandated. They could do other things if they needed to, but I like your description of should have a reason not to.
On a functional level, everything which has a must or a should must be tested for, in my opinion. And everything which has a may should be tested for. And that's like the baseline for any tests. The reason why I'm saying this is, again, networking space, burnt child. I have too much experience with vendors following the spirit of a specification, and the letter of a specification, and not the spirit of a specification, which then turns into a cat and mouse game of updating specifications. And you can argue that there is a somewhat good faith thing with just going to the maximum which is allowed by the specification. Yet, at least in a networking space, it's usually the case that all of a sudden there are slight incompatibilities which tend to lock you into certain market leaders or what have you. And I truly deeply dislike this mode of operation. So the conformance test suite should test whatever anyone finds time to implement as deeply as possible. By the way, anyone in this call who has not yet submitted anything to the test suite, feel welcome to. It's a great way to get into Prometheus, to look at various bits and pieces, how they should work, have discussions about what things should be done or not be done, why they shouldn't be done. You'll learn tons of stuff, and you'll lift the complete ecosystem. Of course, we have increased interoperability. Pitch over. No, but seriously speaking, it's a good way to get involved in Prometheus on the code side if someone wants to do this. 45. Julian might join us in 15 minutes. Let's see if we have topics which we can discuss.
If we have a short topic that we don't need Julian for, we could do it. Otherwise, we could also just wait until he comes and have our break and then do 1 hour straight with Julian.
Scraping via gRPC. That's by Björn, and Björn and Ganesha here, and you're in favor of, like, you voted for the topic.
Isn't that a Frederick thing? So long ago.
No, you put it in, but I think you also have strong opinions about around text. So, but we don't have to go there.
Okay, I even voted for it, and not. Sometimes I put something in I don't even vote for. So that's an issue that it got proposed, and I felt it was closed. It got reopened, and I mostly put it in there because I didn't feel qualified to make a call, and I thought we shouldn't just leave it hanging and discuss it here. Yeah, and Julian said on February 1st, this is how long it's ago, we have added this to the Dev Summit agenda. So I think I added it during the box crop because we collectively decided we want to discuss it here.
It seems like we can discuss that. Like,
we could discuss this now,
yeah.
But like Bartek, I think Bartek, not Frederick. Interesting discussion, blah, blah, blah. So he was perhaps into it. I don't know. Like, I actually don't have a strong opinion about gRPC in particular. Which, I mean, gRPC doesn't say anything about, I mean, it kind of suggests you should use protobuf, but it could still transport the text format, right? It's kind of orthogonal to, should we have a binary scrape format or a text format or both?
Isn't gRPC with protobuf in favor for the sparse histograms you're currently working on as well? Like, how does that relate? I think I remember hearing something that helping for that situation.
I mean, I think gRPC is really yeah, how is this done? I mean, I think the payload of gRPC can be a line of text, right? Or blob of text. So it's not, it could transport text, but it's naturally, because it itself is described in protobuf, so it would naturally incorporate protobuf. But I think the main reason, because you can do protobuf via HTTP, right? I think the main reason why people want gRPC is not a question about the format. It's more like, yeah, making it more, I guess, more efficient.
Well, it reduces some complexity, like beyond just efficiency. If you like if you have a backend service that is only gRPC, it means you don't have to spin up a second web server port, etc., just for /metrics. And I believe like Kubernetes supports gRPC health checks now, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. So like it is getting a bit more like just widespread among similar like health checking and things like that.
I don't know, like I mean, there are some people who have strong opinions about gRPC either way, right? So, and I'm not one of them. So, I mean, we could also, like, now we have GitHub discussions, right? We could turn this into a GitHub discussion and wait for input if none of us has a strong opinion.
And like some community members already seem in favor of it. Like, is there? I guess my question is there a reason we don't want this? Just, I guess, complexity of scraping. Like we have to have another path and scraping code.
I mean, historically, it was more or less a case of at that time, text was quick enough, even quicker, so you didn't need anything else, and you're kind of required to retain text anyway, because that makes debugging easier and it makes exposing stuff easier and such. And then, yeah, people had strong opinions. It got dropped. That's the historic reason. I mean, the same boat as Björn, as I don't really care about this. I care that text is always available, because that's what is easiest for humans when they need to debug and just need to do a thing quickly. Beyond this,
Is Open Metrics actually specifying the transport format? Like, does it have to be HTTP or is it neutral in that regard?
we rely on, we explicitly refer to TLS by name, and that kind of pulls HTTP in. But if we were being too stringent here, that would be a bug in the spec and not. Like if there's a good use case to do FTP, stupid example, but then yeah. Let me see. but the main focus of open metrics is the wire protocol, or is the wire format. So
and open metrics specifically has protobuf.
yes, text is mandatory.
And text.
Proto is optional. You must support HTTP GET and return. You must be able to, if you get a normal HTTP GET, that you send back text. That's
okay. So that kind of, if someone wants gRPC to not expose an HTTP socket, they would not be able to be compliant with open metrics.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, you could argue that they can close it, but like the explicit verbiage, implementers must expose metrics in the open metrics format in response to a simple HTTP GET request to a documented URL for a given process or device. This endpoint should be called /metrics. Implementers may also expose open metric formats metrics in other ways, such as by regularly pushing metric sets to an operator configured endpoint over HTTP. But that other is may, so you can also do non-HTTP or basically whatever. It's also not bound to be precisely either that text format or proto. If you do proto, it's that proto. But in theory, you can even argue that you can have a JSON or something which follows the same semantics.
I mean,
it's like gRPC is still on top of HTTP.
Yeah, HTTP
so like
2, right?
2, yes.
Yeah, so you could just implement a GET there without like opening a security breach or something. Yeah, I don't know. Like I don't feel qualified with gRPC to really make a call here. But...
Yeah. It seems like the consensus is we don't feel strongly.
We can see if that YouTube video from Futurama still is exactly at plus minus the same amount of upvotes and downvotes. I just skimmed the complete thing. The only other must, which is relevant, which I found quickly, is you must be able to support TLS 1.2. So you cannot have anything which is super broken. We didn't do 1.3, even though that would be nicer. But yeah, TLS 1.2 is or later is the baseline. But beyond this, you don't have anything. But I would be very surprised if you find many gRPC implementations which require SSL. So.
Okay, but I guess if no one here feels strongly either way, we should open this up to like a wider. I mean, we could use the new shiny GitHub discussions feature to just turn this into a discussion and see what's the.
We can have a call for consensus on turning it into a GitHub discussion. I'm looking for the button and I'll just click it because it makes sense to just turn it into a discussion. Okay, any objections to just clicking the thing and we're done?
I mean, done. Then at some point we have to follow up on it, but yeah.
Generals or ideas as a category?
What was the first one?
Sorry?
What was the first one? It was something in ideas. I just missed it.
We have general and ideas. We also have announcement, Q&A, and show and tell, but those three seem to be not quite fitting.
Seems like an idea to me. Like...
Done.
Okay.
Cool. We're almost at the hour. Maybe Julian will join in a bit.
So sorry, what did you do now? Did you just close it or did you?
No, I created it in.
Of course, it doesn't look like that.
It closes in GitHub. It closes the issue and says, "I'm a discussion now. Please discuss here."
The problem is the auto refresh just tells you it's closed there, but it doesn't say it's a discussion. Yeah, okay, now it makes
Okay.
sense. That's why I was.
Cool. Shall we take a 5-minute break?
I was about to suggest this. Okay, then, or let's take a 7-minute break so we see each other at 5 past.
Yeah, let's do
Sounds
that.
good.
See you
Yeah.
then.
See you in a bit.
Hello. We have a fully functioning Julian. So anyone who hears me, if you want to come back, that would be great. Ideal signal becoming back by switching on your camera.
By the way, Richie, the last topic didn't end up having an actual consensus. I don't know if that's expected or.
That's fine. We don't have them often, but sometimes we just don't have any, and then we just don't have any.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the absence of a consensus basically means we didn't reach one. Sometimes we have orange stuff or red stuff, which is signaling that we explicitly do not find consensus, which is like the passive-aggressive version of a consensus. But sometimes it just peters out or it doesn't need any action. Okay. People are starting to come back. Perfect. Let me see. So Julian, I don't know if you saw Slack. We've been waiting for you with a few topics. We can, in theory, discuss package management, but I feel as if discussing this with, for example, Tina in the room is probably not going to be super effective. But we also can, no worries.
The alert manager topics, weren't they really highly rated?
Yeah, that's basically the only thing which, yeah, else we only have the clarify when feature flag, but that has fewer votes. Okay, so the one is renaming alert manager, but that also has Frederick and Bartek listed, which kind of means we can't really discuss it. Yeah, so let's go to this one. Julian, FYI, the thing about allow non-Prometheus label names we skipped because we had too many Grafana people in the call and not enough non-Grafana people. We still only have 2 non-Grafana Prometheus team members. So if you don't feel comfortable, we can also skip it. But yeah, either works. Julian?
Yes, I am opening the doc.
Okay.
Okay. So I actually don't have the doc. Do you have a quick link to the document?
Oh, of course. There you go.
Okay. So what's the topic now that we want to discuss? The non-Prometheus label names in the alert manager.
Yes.
Yeah, so I see that indeed we have a lot of new pull requests from Grafana Labs about just like abstracting everything in the alert manager. But like this is not only with the label names, it's in different places that I have noticed that recently. And like, yeah, we need to decide if we want to have alert manager like in the center of other monitoring tools or not. And I also note that's a funny thing that like even today I actually did look for the ad manager on Google and I stumbled into a Google ad because it was not my account around someone promoting a alert manager but better. So definitely like there are people who don't like the lack of flexibility that the alert manager is having. But yeah, we really need to decide what we want to do with that manager, especially since like the direction that Grafana wants to give to the alert manager is definitely something that we need to discuss, and it's also why, for example, I have not yet like asked to have some Grafana people maintaining the alert manager officially. So we have some quite consistent contribution for multiple Grafana people in the alert manager, but I am not sure that the direction they want to give to the project would match what's currently the direction, and I did not want to promote them directly to give like a chèque emploi in French, like it's probably the same in English, to give them like free maintenance and that they can guide a project without having like knowing where we want to go with the alert manager.
What I just out of interest, what are the other abstraction layers except this one about naming?
I can find that back in 2 minutes.
It's just interesting, like I mean, I think the win-win outcome would be if we all agree that those changes are actually not super against whatever the way Prometheus wants to use alert manager, and we could just satisfy everyone. But if there are other requests, I mean, I'm not aware of them because I'm not on that squad that's working on that, but if there are like indeed needs that are totally against how we want alert manager to work, then it would change the discussion, right? That's if it's really just about names, I think is something we could probably solve, is my gut feeling. But if it's about more fundamental things,
yeah, I think that the other ones were mainly about Cortex and abstracting the clustering part and abstracting the maintenance of the storage also caused some issues for the plain alert manager. So those abstractions, they were not really, they were merged. That's not an issue, but like that was just like another pull request to abstract something else in the alert manager. And yeah, but I think the first two examples were really like the way that we manage the maintenances, the way that we do the clustering was abstracted. And also there are a lot of callbacks that have been added here and there just for Cortex. So that's the things that I remember now.
So with my Grafana hat on, I put something into the meeting notes. I can also link it here. I caught Josh. He was out sick and he's back today, and we didn't really have a lot of time. But from what he told me, this is those 3 lines is the complete set of what he needs, so to speak, on his end. Which is deliberately designed to be as lightweight as possible and as uncontroversial as possible, to just do the minimum amount of changes. Also with my Grafana hat on, my status is, and I'm certain this didn't change, that Josh actually will get time to do alert manager maintainership for Prometheus if Prometheus team wants that, like actually get time where we really have a maintainer back, which is, I think, sorely needed for alert manager. With my Prometheus hat on, what Julian said is about what Julian said about some people not liking Alert Manager and basically playing on Alert Manager is not flexible enough is an ongoing concern of mine. We had this discussion in 2017 or 18 at the Dev Summit as part of the Autolator and technical overview discussions. My point back then was basically I would like Alert Manager to become a generic engine for dealing with alerts, which come from a variety of systems, are piped through whatever, and then they make their way to a human or to an automated system, what have you. Maybe they're persisted. So you have a lightweight ticketing system, or you have an autolator where you can actually attach stuff to the alerts without having to leave the system. And that opinion hasn't changed. If anything, that opinion has become a lot stronger. I think there is a huge gap in the ecosystem there where a truly generic alert handling engine could be sitting. I think that with Prometheus and with basically the cloud and as such CNCF steamrolling large areas of tech for good reason, and Prometheus alongside Kubernetes leading this charge, that Prometheus is in a really, really good position to actually say, we think things should look like this. There are things which I think are non-negotiable, like if you all of a sudden were to introduce fully static or fully hierarchical data models and you mandate them. I mean, you can stuff them in a label, of course. But beyond this, that's, for example, something which I think wouldn't make sense, where we put artificial constraints on stuff. But opening up carefully without breaking assumptions within Prometheus should be doable. And like the worst thing, at least with changing or allowing more characters in label names, which you just need to support alerts from other engines and other monitoring and observability systems. If push comes to shove and you need to put this back into Prometheus for some reason, you can put it as part of a label value, which is not ideal, obviously. But that seems to be the worst case which I could come up with if Alert Manager becomes more generic. The advantages, again, as we are trailblazing the thing here, the space, we get to actually define how to do alerts properly and just have yet another thing. In particular, with the Prometheus Conformance Program, this becomes even more powerful because all of a sudden, to become Prometheus compatible, if you're able to emit alerts, you need to be able to emit alerts towards Alert Manager. This puts Alert Manager into a really, really good position to become a standard. Maybe at some point we'll rename it and it will get a better name, but that's not here now. Yeah.
Which is also another question that I have, is that how is that plan to extend the Alert Manager playing with the work that Ganesh is putting to normalize and create an alert generator conformance program? Would it mean that Grafana itself would not be conformant with that Manager thing then, because it would create any kind of labels?
At the moment, yes. Of course, like if you emit stuff which is not compatible, you're not compatible. Easy. Yeah. I mean, with my Grafana hat on, there's, now that you mention it, obviously an interest in not having this happen long term. That seems kind of self-evident. But yeah, of course.
Yeah. We need actual hats for Richie so you can change them.
Do you mean I put this like 5 or 6 or 10 different hats and then
We'll always know
anyone who
which
can
hat you have on.
I mean, I think the chance, I mean, this is more or less what Richie already said. I think the actual like Prometheus way that Alert Manager enforces is like this whole idea of sending the same alerts from different sources, deduplicating them, sending them repeatedly, this whole resolved add thing, and all this semantics, right? Nobody at Grafana Labs is trying to change this. On the contrary, Grafana Labs tries to converge all those alerting sources into this model. And what we are talking about here is kind of a detail. And I mean, the dot is the one thing that always comes up. Richie said we should have a drinking game for that. But of course, once we have solved the dot, there will be other special characters that all of a sudden some alerting source will want to use. And if it's really just about this, we could think it through, and then at the price of widening this, being a bit more tolerant here, we would encourage alert sources to use the semantics that we as Prometheus people like and find useful. And I think that would be a great win for everyone. But of course, if now next day some Grafana alert person comes along and wants to change really fundamental things, then we haven't won anything. But I think my ideas, and Ganesh might know best, that this is really like the friction is really in those things that I think are solvable in a like amicable way. And I mean this pull request with just like abstracting out the validator, I think that wouldn't even work because we have these assumptions in too many places. They are not actually cleanly abstracted in the current code base, right? We have them in AM tool, and I even have on my list that we should make this more have one code doing the validation, but then there is stuff in the UI, right, where if you allow more characters, then you might need special caution in the UI to actually make it that you can even enter it and stuff like that. So I think it wouldn't even work even if we merged that pull request. So I think it's a much better solution to generally allow this, or just come to the conclusion that we don't want to allow this, and then Grafana has to think about if they want to maintain a fork or not.
The pull request was not about allowing dots. It was just about abstracting everything to use it as a library.
Exactly.
So for
but
manager,
they didn't touch the UI, right? So by just abstracting away what they want to abstract away, I think they wouldn't cover everything they need to cover to then, in their own version, allow dots, for example.
Well, my impression is that Alert Manager for Grafana does not need a UI. Grafana is the UI.
Yeah, so if that were the case, they could actually go this escaping path that, I don't know if I suggested this in a public discussion or just internally to them, I lost track. But you could, of course, just have an escaping schema __ UTF-8 data point in hex or something. And then if Grafana, only Grafana owned UIs would be used by the users, they could unescape and all is good, right? But I think what they actually want is that a user could, if they wish so, just go to the native Alert Manager UI and it would still work. And then you would see those ugly escape stuff, right? So I think the desire is really to keep the user as close as possible to the actual true Alert Manager philosophy, and not do this kind of we wrap everything completely and you have no chance of using the native open source stuff. So yeah, I think it's good from Prometheus head. I also need I think it's good from the Prometheus perspective to support like downstream users of Prometheus to stay faithful to that, right? And not wrap it up completely to get their enterprisey single pane of glass, but make this like have little doors in the single pane of glass so informed users could still open it up and use the actual underlying technology.
And also maybe intention-wise, of course, it won't be obvious to everyone on this call. Personally speaking, I've been trying to get Grafana and Grafana Labs to use the Alert Manager as the primary thing since at least 2018. Because I honestly believe that that is the best which we have in the industry, like that basic model, including all the gossip and other things.
Yeah. Also, like there were so many attempts to reinvent Alert Manager within Grafana Labs, and I imagine a million attempts within the industry. So if we had a clear, like here, this is the thing how Prometheus is doing it, and you could use the same thing again, like I think it would be a great win.
I think we had at least 3 different alerting things within Grafana Labs. But that's not the point. The point is this, that as one of the people who's been trying to get Grafana Labs to embrace the alert manager and basically have the alert manager define modern alerting and uplift the industry, I would think it's very nonsensical for Grafana Labs to go away from the philosophy of alert manager. It wouldn't make business sense, and also there's more than enough people within Grafana Labs to prevent this from happening, if this is a concern. Speaking of concerns, we only have 2 non-Grafana team members on this call. I propose that we don't make a call for consensus or anything on this topic in this call. The balance is off.
Yeah, and I mean, we also, despite having so many Grafana people here, we don't know if just allowing arbitrary label names in alert manager would actually fully satisfy what they need. But if, then I mean, essentially, what I would like to see here, that we explore, that we kind of how to phrase that. We don't entirely rule out the possibility of allowing arbitrary label names, and then we explore the possibility if anything surprising would break, right? I mean, there is something like we have those PromQL-esque matchers that I helped introducing actually, and they are not precise PromQL. So from that perspective, there is no like strict consistency requirement, but of course they would choke if you now have a curly brace in the label name, right? So we needed some added features how to quote or escape those, and this would be something to explore. But it doesn't make sense to explore it if we already know that we don't want it. That's kind of where I would. It would be good if we get out of this at least knowing kind of if there's strong opposition anyway, or if we are in principle open to exploring this possibility without making a final call right now.
I think that this is as usual, that we are open to everything, given a good design document.
Regarding design doc, we had this on the team mailing list, but everyone who is not on team obviously doesn't know this. If the feeling in Prometheus team is that this is a thing to explore, then we can ask Josh, and I forgot his name, to basically write out what they think they would like to do, and then we do the usual cycle of getting consensus on the design document. And to make it explicit, I think if we need any UI changes or anything in Alert Manager, then that this design document by definition needs to also include all the changes which are required on Alert Manager side without any third-party UI or UX. In my opinion,
I mean, I think this is all the intersection between Grafana people and Prometheus people. I think we are all very aware that there's, like, we don't even have to discuss that, right? We wouldn't have a change in Alert Manager that isn't supported by the Alert Manager's own UI, in case that's a worry here.
Another thing is that if the dots are so important for Alert Manager, so is there anything blocking to have them directly in the whole ecosystem?
Yes. One of the options of supporting first-class histograms would be having a dot operator. I mean, there's this historical thing, right? The dot is coming from how it was used in very old Borgmon versions, and so I'm not sure if that was initially the if that was explicit, deliberate. That was not, but I know that Brian really liked, would have liked it, or would have liked to explore it. But also, dot could be an operator, right? And whatever field selection operator. And I think that was the strongest reason to not allow it in metric names and label names, to not close down that possibility.
I am asking that because, once again, in the document of Ganesh about the alert generator, it is mandated that you emit the alert metric, which has to contain like the labels of the alert, so that if the alert has a dot, you would need to emit a label with a dot if you want to.
Yeah, so no, I mean, I think alert generators that generate non-Prometheus compliant alerts would not be compliant with Prometheus.
But it means that the alert manager would allow non-compliant alerts too.
Yes.
So what does it mean to be compliant if it's still accepted at the end by the alert manager?
I mean, alert manager, I mean, the idea is that alert manager accepts labels that are not Prometheus compliant. So if the Prometheus compliance program tells you this alert you've just generated is not Prometheus compliant, I think it's still consistent, right?
The thing is, you need to be, and we had this confusion several times. Also, like Ganesh and myself, when we discussed this, the tests which Ganesh is currently working on are testing the generation of alerts, not that the alert manager takes anything in and what the alert manager does with it. I would like to at some point also have these tests, but there's an argument to be made it's not as pressing because there is no second implementation which tries to recreate alert manager. The tests which are currently being made are just for how you emit alerts. And as that needs to be Prometheus compatible, that is what you're looking at. If you have non-Prometheus data sources and you emit an alert towards alert manager, which is then also not Prometheus compatible, then this is distinct from the Prometheus compliance. Because you're not actually taking Prometheus data and emitting it. I mean, if, I don't know, Datadog, whatever, they will most certainly also have mechanisms to emit alerts. If they were to support the Prometheus alerting style, they can be compatible with Prometheus alerting while still emitting their own thing. It's not a you must not emit anything else. It's just a if you do this, you must emit it correctly from Prometheus' point of view.
Yeah, and I think an alternative alert manager that accepts Prometheus alerts doesn't have to accept non-Prometheus alerts, right? But you could, I mean, unless the spec later says you must not accept other alerts, then you could still be a compliant Prometheus alert manager accepting these other alert types or not. I think it's actually important that by changing, if we ever change this in alert manager, I think it's important to say that this doesn't imply that Prometheus now must be able to grade those alerts. It's kind of the other way around. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it still feels strange to me to have that imbalance, but
I mean,
let me explain why it feels strange to have the imbalance first, because to talk to the ad manager, you anyway need to abide to its rules, to abide to its own API. It's not like you can directly emit from any monitoring tool. So you need to transform, to resend the alert frequently, that kind of things needs to happen anyway. So it's strange that we would enable new things without them really useful for the project. But once again, like, we need a design document to see exactly what this is all about and what would be the scope and what would be the actual benefits, rather than changing them into underscores.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good argument to, I mean, there's value in just keeping everything consistent, and that's why it is the way in the moment, right? And we also, I mean, I remember when Prometheus was accepting all kind of metric names and whatever, and it was just fine. And we just made it more stricter about it because that would result in weird things like metrics you cannot access in PromQL. So there is a value in having this consistency. It's just, yeah, this is all coming from a learned manager could actually be a more generic tool easily. And then this is a constant source of friction that non-Prometheus alert generators have no idea why a dot or a plus or a minus is not accepted as a name.
Just to plus one what Julian said, I think, just to have another outside voice outside of Grafana, I think I agree with what Julian said, design doc, and then be specific in there. But I think being open to these changes generally sounds good. Just wanted to add another opinion.
Okay, so then we could kind of conclude this is like not a red line, like not in the same way as now we want a different way of deduplicating alerts or something. So it's, but we want to see a design doc that iterates through all the implications, and then based on that, we can make the real decision if that's even an option or not.
Yep.
One important point, it's not just an outside Prometheus and or Grafana voice. That's why we opened this thing up for other people to speak up. It's not a just, it's what we are spending a lot of time and effort on actually getting. So speak up.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's why I came forward now, for exactly that reason.
Good. I mean, the reason should be that you feel comfortable, not that I keep nagging you about it.
I did that on my own. No worries.
Good. So, welche Schweine hätten wir denn gerne? Prometheus histogram, no. Renaming metrics.
Should we put this? I mean, usually we put a consensus in there, which was just we'll write a design doc and see. So perhaps we should write this down as well.
I deliberately didn't call for consensus because I feel uncomfortable with the overhang of Grafana people on Prometheus team on this call. If just we agree, we already have consensus. I mean, Julian and Ben can simply block it, but it feels a little bit of an imbalance.
Unlike Cortex, the Prometheus governance doesn't say anything about companies. We are all individual members and we are not representing our companies really. So
I don't have a problem calling for consensus.
Just call for consensus and see if someone objects.
If you want to have a slapstick moment now, Julian needs to actually object to the consensus after I write it. Just Consensus. We're open to the idea and intend to explore it in a design document. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing? Ben has this grin, he's planning something. Okay, then we have consensus. Renaming metrics. Julian, you have the floor.
Renaming what?
Renaming metrics, you put it in.
Yes. So the question from that user is basically like, should we have a mechanism in the TSDB to be able to rename metrics in the past, which I think could work a bit like a tombstone or something like that, so that they can easily access their own metrics. I know that we have, Ben can probably speak there because he was at some point looking into the tooling that would enable you to relabel blocks in the past or something like that, that apparently Thanos has to rename old metrics. But like, I don't know if we want to do that kind of thing in Prometheus itself or not, or just say to the user that they just have to use OR and that we are not interested into exposing aliases for metrics in the exposition format and that kind of things. Because the issue was also that they could expose an alias of the metrics in the exposition formats. I personally think that we should not do that, that we could have a tool to eventually apply relabeling on blocks, but that like I did not want to make that call alone. I wanted to bring that to the Dev Summit.
Speaking as someone who is strongly in favor of renaming and as speaking as the person who actually suggested the alias system, even though I would probably prefer tombstones, as someone who has wanted this within Prometheus for 6 years now, I don't think we should be doing it. The reason why I think we shouldn't be doing this is I fear it will become a permanent thing. Like we intended to be temporary, and it will become a permanent thing. We intend it to be a migration mechanism, and it will be used or leveraged to have more than one name, to have long-running aliases, to maybe have info-style metrics where you have actually changing identity of things and you just tag on new aliases and you refer back to something where we have a static set of labels and your changing labels are just mapped back through aliases. And that's just me thinking about bad use cases at the moment. That's before having one-to-n migrations in the aliases or n-to-1 or something. And that's before people then demanding that we do more and more and more and support even more. I think we have a horrible user experience around major renaming of, for example, node exporter metric names or node exporter metric names, and also potentially node exporter metric name. But we should probably have tools where you can run prompt tool or something to run a migration, as opposed to carrying this weight all the time. I think we need to solve the use case, but not in this manner.
Yeah, there is. So another really painful one was like Kubernetes metric change and like kube state metrics. And like I forget how many months it took to upgrade all of that. And some of the tricky parts there are also labels will change. So like the migration strategy is not just I need to change like a metric got renamed. It might also be that a metric, I think one example would be like CPU limits on pods or on containers is now a label instead of a separate metric. So there's like some complicated situations like that if we could put into a migration strategy would be really nice.
Tombstone.
So then we are back to the relabeling tool that Thanos has to just change the blocks.
Yeah.
Chris, what you just described is why I immediately prefer tombstones over alias because it's time series specific and not metric family specific. But I mean, if we did tombstones and pointed to another thing, long-running queries and such would become weird all of a yeah, no, label matching and such. And now imagine you actually change 3 different things over time, and you have different times when those things actually change. You use tombstones to point to the other thing, but how do you actually do the label matching? Like, do you forward, backwards look? Are you strict or are you loose? No matter how I think about this, we would somehow be violating principle of least surprise.
Yeah,
It would get too messy in TSDB to handle these aliases, and it's ideal to make the changes to these labels whenever the request comes, but that would mean a compaction per request. Handling something like Tombstone would be really messy, and I don't think I'm comfortable adding that another complexity in TSDB. And some kind of migration path, as you said, sounds like a good option, because I don't think this will be very frequent. If it is, then they should change the source from where the matrix is coming. After they fix it, just use the migration path. That's my thought.
Mm. I mean, we could just offload all the TSDB messiness on Ganesh and sorry, bad joke. But I think we can actually make a call for consensus that we don't support this, but that we don't support this solution, but we support the use case. Let me. Consensus. We would like to support the use case of migrating metric names and label sets. We do not intend to support it through modifying TSDB or metric semantics, but through a relabeling tool. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing? Chris, you look torn.
I was trying to interpret modifying TSDB. Could that be interpreted as we won't change TSDB at all? Or something like that, whereas I can see TSDB being changed to support a relabeling tool or something like that, but that seemed very
I mean, I can
weeds, and then I was like, eh.
I can write TSDB implementation, so it's clear that you can actually change the values in the database, just not how the database works.
I do not intend to support. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
Consensus. We would like to support the use case of migrating metric names and label sets. We do not intend to support it through modifying TSDB implementation or metric semantics, but through a relabeling tool. All agreed? Anyone disagreeing? Nice. Oh. gRPC scraping, Simon. We lack Bartek, but we could talk about Alert Manager custom webhooks / body template. So Julian and Ben, you have the floor. Julian, Ben?
Yep. I was just trying to remember what this was about.
Currently, the Art Manager webhook has a static content, and there are many requests from users to change that content, to apply templating and all kind of things, just to be able to make it really very generic and be able to post to any kind of machinery without something in the middle.
Yeah, also, there's data that comes from the templates that are used for other systems. So you have a Slack message or a PagerDuty message, but you also want the templates that you apply to those to also be available in your downstream.
I'm curious. So I don't know if this is real or only somewhat related. I've had the idea of also being able to like get data from a secondary source or something like that.
Yeah, that was the other thing, which is to be able to make an HTTP call to get additional data and include that as well.
Yeah,
So,
which like I think would have some really nice things, but I don't know if we want to support that.
So about the extra data, one use case that I have and one of my Art Manager webhook receiver is just querying Grafana and posting the message, the full dashboard or part of the panels into the actual alert that I sent to the user.
We had one at GitLab that would call a webhook and return a snapshot URL from Grafana.
Yeah, also.
Yeah.
You can also, like, if you want to, you can also build this with Prometheus proper. Of course, you can just have your URL and you put stuff into an annotation at the right place, and that works fine. I've done this for years. I would be strongly against building a mechanism where Alert Manager has a hard dependency on anything.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, but you don't have to making an HTTP call is not a hard dependency.
I know, but I want to be very, very, very vocal about the point that A, it must not be a hard dependency, and B, it needs pretty aggressive timeouts, and then just carry on. Because this is not yeah.
Completely agree with that.
Yeah,
Like, you don't want your alert to not be delivered because you're waiting on a Grafana snapshot or.
Well, you know that if it takes more than 15 seconds, you get the alert twice, right? If you have an HA setup.
I would much rather get 10 alerts and then fix my system than miss that one alert, which is super important, and the customer's boss's boss picks up the phone. Like pager fatigue is a thing, blah, 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 blah. But if I have to choose, yeah. And I mean, we can define the semantics of the thing. Like if you manage to get a thing like external content and it's different from others, we should just treat it as the same. And that again, we are violating principle of least surprise a little bit. And if you maybe get from two different sources or two different alert manager instances, get slightly different data from two different points, like all of those things, and then you resend and a different alert manager starts sending, and that cannot reach the thing, or it gets a completely different view. Like you have tons and tons of messiness, and all that messiness must be completely isolated from the alert going through and potentially looking ugly, but going through.
We also need to see what we want to actually support in those things. Like, for example, like what part do you want to template? Do you want to enforce JSON and something like JSONet or Q? Do you want to allow just a single line of text to be sent via the webhook? So all those kind of things should be like something we should think about. I know that there were multiple proposals to use like JSONet and to just like let the user specify any JSONet template, for example. But I don't know what's the situation now with JSONet, as it seems that Grafana is moving to Q. I don't know in which direction we actually want to go for that.
You mean skew matter and poly and all those things?
Yeah, and also apparently the next generation of mixins will probably also use Q, and there I'm looking at Matthias.
So all of the
Yeah,
templating and such in Alert Manager now was just Go templating, right?
Yes, which is terrible for JSON.
That's true. I guess that seems a bit orthogonal. Like we could keep this, like that could be a separate discussion of do we want to support other templating?
I feel as if we're expanding the discussion quite a bit. I mean, for the initial thing, having used or having tried to use templates with Alert Manager, I stopped because it was horrible. And I think we can all agree that we need something which is more user-friendly. And that might be a first good step. As to the second, we would need to have a better system in place before we actually allow pulling in other data. And at that time, hopefully, schemata, poly, and such are a lot farther, and we have a migration strategy for mixins or upgrade strategy, depending. I like Julian's idea of trying to have a holistic design here. But I'm not certain how this could look, but maybe we don't need to figure this out right now. The template currently sucks, so maybe we can just try and make this.
Well, no, the point is that there is no templating at all for that specific thing that users are willing. It is just a pass-through of the alert, and you cannot change anything in the alert. It is just going just like that to the webhook receiver. You cannot change a single bit of the webhook.
That makes sense, yeah.
We are not speaking about sending messages to Slack. The webhook is just super inflexible.
Yeah, so like we can't. Yeah, so we can't say like, "Hey, take these annotations and call them foo instead," or something like that. If that's what the
or anything
needs.
Or change some or add titles. That kind of thing. Nothing can happen in the webhook.
Yeah.
That's what users are complaining about. That the webhook is super fixed, and if they use Slack, they do some transformation on the labels for Slack. They use the same for the webhook, but they cannot change anything with the webhooks that they are actually sending. It is just like you have the content of the webhook, and you must have something which is specifically tailored for Alert Manager to be able to receive it.
Yeah.
And I can totally see, like, if you have something like JSONet, I would expect that it would be possible to directly talk to Jira, for example, without the need for Jira alert in the middle.
Where would you put the JSONet though? That would live like
on the Alert Manager.
Yeah, like that's
similar to templates.
I'm even myself, like, having written so much JSON in the past, right? Like, I could see that working, but it's too. I mean, then again, like a programming language like Go is like very dynamic as well. I was about to say that JSON is too dynamic. I don't know. I think Go is a bit more careful to handle in like edge case situations where JSON might not be as obvious, or even Q. And then like it's like right in the path where you want to alert. So I'd be careful and hesitant, even myself, putting JSON in there.
But if you end up with Go, you're basically in the same scenario that you are now. If you like write a sidecar in Go that takes a webhook and forwards it to somewhere else.
Yeah, or if you speak about the Go templating engine, good luck making JSON out of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Aren't we a little bit far? Honestly, I misinterpreted the context of the question or discussion initially, but if should we scope the discussion back down to just templating in the webhook and then expand it back up again?
Yeah, or maybe break it into two, one for the augmentation idea of getting additional data and one for the custom webhooks, since those.
Yeah, and I think we will need to postpone this discussion to the next Dev Summit.
Yep.
Oh, we're at time. Should we make a call for consensus that we are happy expanding this? And then if someone wants to implement it, they can just do it? Or not? We can also just...
I would just keep that to the next Dev Summit.
Yeah, our consensus could be let's split this into two topics in the next Dev Summit. Maybe.
Since we are at time, I just have a question about the first call for consensus that I see. Because like we already have the consensus now in Prometheus. We already have backoff for HTTP 429. It's the user needs to enable it. And we even follow the max age that is sent by the target.
Yeah, it's more around that second, like, let's suggest and like kind of build some suggestions for the heuristics.
Okay.
Like some of those heuristic, yeah, like we've explored this a little bit, but that's the key part is we need some heuristics here.
Okay.
So that Prometheus knows what to do. And that might be retry after, it might be more than that.
Okay. Yeah, it might be interesting to contact the prompt scale people because since they implemented that in Prometheus, maybe they are actually already using that.
Yeah, we could definitely reach out to them.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Yep. No problem.
Just to also close the other thing mentally, consensus. Let's split this into subtopics and discuss it next Dev Summit. Seems a little bit heavyweight for full consensus, but good. Hamas. Thank you very much. And see you in 1 month at the latest.
Yeah, bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Now I need to stop.